Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. If you have ever thought about writing a book, this podcast episode is for you. This is the third and final episode in a three-part series on book writing that I did with Amy Lynch. Now, if you did not listen to the other two episodes, I highly recommend that you do so. I will include both links in the show notes. You can just click and go from there. And if you're not familiar with Amy Lynch is the founder and writer at Fernling Creative, a premium writing agency that generates exceptional content in your voice because words sell everything. Enjoy the episode. Amy, welcome back.
Thanks, Matt.
I appreciate your time. And the last two episodes were very intriguing to me. So we had talked about your journey getting into book writing. We talked a lot about systems, about how to get in a creative mindset. And all of that was really good. It gave me a lot to think about. And I've actually changed a lot of things based on what we went through, based on what we processed. But I want to talk about why someone would want to actually write a book other than it being a lifelong dream. So there's a lot of people listening to this episode. They've always wanted to write a book. It's always been somewhere inside them, but they've been pushing it off to the future. One day I want to write a book, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, whatever it is, but they keep pushing it out. So other than achieving a lifelong dream, what are some other reasons why someone would want to write a book?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and obviously fundamental to my work and my business at Fernling Creative. So you've hit the nail on the head as far as a starting place, the foundation, the basement of why people write a book. And usually when people find out that I'm a writer and that I'm a book writer, I'll hear a statement just like this: I really think that I have a book in me. Like, they use the term in me. And so I do think that on some level, a book springs from the heart of a person. That's in their heart to write a book. But you've kind of covered that one. So we're moving beyond having a book in your heart to write it and a desire to do that. So I'll just throw out the main reasons that I write books with people, high-level professionals. Why are we doing this over and over? So really typically, people write a book for increased influence in their field and in their industry. They want the credibility that comes from having a book. So this can come in the form of being a consultant, a very respected and credible consultant. Having a book means you literally wrote the book on something. And so therefore that gives instant credibility. And when you say, this is my consulting fee, people don't shake their head and run because you wrote the book on that topic. So credibility would be a huge, huge factor and reason behind why people write books. And credibility and influence are have locked arms on this. Being an influencer in your field, in your industry, is also really powerful. And the ways that comes out in a person's career, the overflow of that influence and credibility, is in consulting, and also speaking engagements and professional development and workshops, keynotes, TED Talks. A person who has written a book is viewed as a person, a leader, a thought leader in that field or that industry, who is credible to give a talk to lead another group of professionals, to teach through professional development, and to influence others in that field and industry. So influence and credibility go hand in hand, and those would be top reasons. Really related, closely related topics and reasons would be marketing and just getting your name out there. So maybe a person doesn't want to go on the speaking circuit, but they just want more business, for what they already do. Like if they're a CFO, like the kind that is fractional. So if they're a fractional CFO and they just want to do that, they don't really want to teach others about it at all. They just want more people to know about what they do. Then writing a book serves so many purposes because A, you have a book in tow and attached to your name, and therefore your services become more valuable and more respected. But also that book, typically what I do is I go book to blog to social media content. So I take a person's book, let's say it's an 8-chapter book. It's really typical, 50,000 words and 8 chapters is just the sweet spot today in 2024 for trade books. And by trade books, I mean books for lay people. The books that we all read are called trade books, versus like academic kind of work and other things. So trade books can be broken into blogs that a person puts on their website as a CEO blog, if that's what you are, or the CFO, from the desk of the CFO. Those things turn into all kinds of content like blogs, which then of course has a tremendous influence on SEO. Also, they get turned into LinkedIn posts. So a book I'm writing right now, 50,000 word, 8-chapter book. I rewrote it in real time. So the author, the client doesn't have to do anything. They can just keep on doing what they're great at. This person I'm talking about is a doctor. She can keep doctoring. And I wrote 2 years of her CEO blog for her website and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of LinkedIn posts that are in a variety of forms. There's long posts, one to 400 words. There's very short posts of 20 to 40 words and everything in between. And I just deliver them. And sometimes I even post them for the person, but 2 years minimally of really on-brand content from a book. And so it just keeps on going. It's like a snowball that grows and grows and grows. A book has so much value and just keeps on adding and to the person's personal brand and growing their brand, whether they want to consult or speak or just keep on doing what they do best. So those would be the main reasons. A couple other reasons that come up pretty often are a desire to share a person's professional experience, but usually it's a real mixture of professional and personal experience. So if a person has 40 years of experience in a field, they want to share that. That's their career, it's personal. It's what they've learned in a lifetime of professional work, and they want to share that. And it's a mixture of professional information and content with what it's been as a person to work in that industry and field and what they've found out and what has been pain points and growth points and important lessons along the way. And they want to share that in a book form. And they want to share it in a way that helps their industry and helps the younger people in their field, but just generally helps others. So it solves problems. It's helping people to not repeat the failures and the mistakes that they themselves feel that they have made, so that people don't reinvent the wheel. So that category of sharing experience, helping others, solving problems, and sharing experience and expertise together is a motivating factor. And I think of one book that I wrote earlier this year where when we were nailing down the target audience, which we talked about in the last podcast, he said to me, he runs a large medical policy group. He said, if 3 people read this book, my 3 sons, I will have felt it was all worth it. And, so that's just kind of speaking to this last category of people who are wanting to share their professional lives, their whole lives, holistically with another group of people. And in this CEO's case, with three people in particular. So that's a lot to answer your question, but I think those are the main categories.
I like how you start it with the heart, right? It has to start in the heart. And it's almost like it goes from heart to logical. So I really appreciate that. You have the desire, you have the need, almost like someone saying, I want to run a marathon. So they have that pull, that heart, if you will, that emotional tie behind it. I want to run a marathon. And then it transitions into the logical piece on you get discipline from maybe getting up early to start jogging. And then from there, there's different benefits physically. And then all these logical things fall into place. And you'd mentioned, increased influence, credibility. You wrote the book on something. So, like, you wrote the book on blank. It definitely positions you as that expert, speaking engagements, being a thought leader, and then obviously the marketing piece. And I think it really ties into dripping out content. I think this is so important because years and years ago, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking, 2 decades ago, it would have been really good for someone to write a book, so spend a lot of time, write the book. They are elevated as that thought leader, they're elevated as that expert, and then they build a following. And I feel like today that has been turned on its head where you can drip content out. You mentioned different blogs, you mentioned SEO, LinkedIn posts, all these different things. So you're actually building the audience as you're writing and dripping the content of the book out. I just think it's a much better way to get the book into the world. And I appreciate you mentioning that. But I want to go back to the marathon, someone running a marathon. If you ask someone on, let's say, mile 19, right? So they're running, they're so close to completing it. If you ask someone on mile 19, are you happy you started running? They might say no, right? They might say, like, I hate my life. I should have never ran, because it's a really tough spot to get into regarding a marathon. It's probably not the time to ask them, are you excited that you are running your first marathon? So I'm saying that because there are going to be different roadblocks. There are going to be different things that come along the way through the writing process that are going to frustrate people, even if they have this incredible big why, heart and logical. What are some of the things that they can do to overcome that? What are some of the objections that people give you toward the end of the project? What would be some of those things that you would say, hey, these are some things to look for. Here's how you overcome them.
It's a great question, and I have a very clear answer. If you have me on your team, there's no obstacles to overcome, because I know that sounds like a big statement. However, as a ghostwriter, it's really personal. The relationship is personal because I'm like living in a person's head and I notice things. So if I notice that someone is running out of gas, I respond and give them the support that they need. So here's an example. I'm writing a book with a wonderful client, a brilliant person, and she is a very busy, dashing literally around the globe, doing big things. And I'm under non-disclosure, Matt, so I'm not able to say a lot of those things, but a very busy, highly accomplished person. And we were writing an 8-chapter book, and we got 4 done, and she began to wobble. She was dashing to South Africa, and then she was in London, and she wanted to do her part, which just really meant voice recording a list of questions that I gave her. It was not that difficult, but she was having a hard time just focusing and sitting down in her office and just voice recording it. So typically what she would do is I would send her a number of questions for the chapter that we were working on, and all she had to do was hit record and go down through the questions and answer them and send me the voice recording. So even that was becoming very difficult for her. So I just said to her, hey, I'm coming down there. I had to fly to Texas. Said, I'll be there. Let's pick a day and we will knock out the rest of this book, your contribution to the rest of this book in one day. And then you can be utterly relieved of the stress and the pressure of this, and it'll be done. It's going to get done. So I was responsive in that way and said, she really wants to do this, but she's wobbling. So that's the first time I've done it that way. And it was just so helpful to her. We went there, we went out for margaritas, we sat down in a room, and I had it all prepared. So all she had to do is show up, and we got the raw content that we needed for the 50% of the book. And then I gave her a hug and I came back to Philadelphia and I wrote the rest of the book, and she can keep on doing what she's doing. So that's an example of when you have a ghostwriter and a book coach. Sometimes I'm just one. I might just be a book coach or a ghostwriter or a combination. Then I act responsively to a person's needs. And I've never not finished a book. No one has ever run out of gas because we change our approach to get the job done with a high level of excellence, whatever that means. Even if it's a book in a day, we can do it.
What about if someone has a fear of rejection? Like what if the publisher rejects my work?
Hmm. Well, that's not really a thing anymore, Matt. Since '07, that whole deal has changed. Up until 2007, that was a valid question. However, the landscape has utterly changed with the onset of social media. So before then yes, you had to submit your work. Before it got to a publisher, it had to go through a literary agent. There was no other way. There was one path to book publication, and it was through obtaining a literary agent who then shopped your book to the publishers who would accept or reject it. The bigger question is getting an agent, because an agent will only take on a book if they really believe they can get a publisher to sign on. So that is how it used to be. But with the advent of social media, there's no more guessing involved. A person who has 300,000 followers can absolutely sell enough books to pay for itself. So all the guessing went out. However, big publishers, which then through conglomerates have changed to five. There's only five US major publishers now. And they don't work with anybody who doesn't already have social proof. So you can't approach a publisher through a lit agent unless you more or less can prove that you, in nonfiction, I'm only speaking nonfiction. Fiction writers, the game is different, but we're not talking about that here. So nonfiction writers have social proof or they don't approach the big five publishers. So then what do? They self-publish, which used to be a dirty word and today is very affirming and very respected, or they hybrid publish. When they get a small publisher who believes in their work, who will give them the editorial team and support that they need to publish. So it's one step removed. Lots of very famous authors are self-publishing because of all the rights that are involved and the artistic control. But if they need the assistance of an editorial team, then a hybrid publisher like mine, Fernling Press, is an example of that. We do all the heavy lifting to make sure that your book is top shelf quality. And I only work with nonfiction books by high level professionals that are premium quality. That's the only field. So that's my little shtick, and everything that I choose to publish fits that mold and will be successful for what the goals are for that author. Now, if they hybrid publish and start selling thousands of copies, then they very likely might get picked up by a larger publisher. But then why do that when your book is selling already and give up 85% of your profits rather than 2% that you have to pay to like a company like KDP Amazon?
Would you say that the overwhelming majority of books put out into the world now are not with one of the five big US publishers? It's with another publishing agency?
Absolutely. And the quality is remarkable in hybrid and self-publishing. people just realize they don't need to go there. The big five, Random House, Penguin, etc., have become celebrity publishers. So when someone already is a celebrity on social media, then they get an audience in nonfiction. Then they get an audience with a big five publisher, and off they go. So if you're not a celebrity to begin with, hybrid and self-publishing is very respectable, and that is the majority for sure.
All right, so let's go to another category, which, all right, so we have the publishing thing taken care of, but what about the fear of failure? So what if someone has this massive why of the intention behind putting the book in the world, and then they don't even come close to hitting their why? How would you help them overcome that fear?
Well, so we said in a previous podcast, Matt, that the clients that I work with, everybody knows now, are high-level professionals with experience in their field. And I was saying when I was talking about my normal client, my typical client, they arrived to me with half of one chapter written. So they've already experienced failure. Like, I wanted to write a book enough to where I actually sat down and began doing it, got overwhelmed, couldn't find my way, lost my path, and put it down. And that was 8 years ago. I still have a chapter. And then I heard about you, Amy. And so here I am today to talk it over. Can we pick up the baton and move forward? So most of the people have already failed that test. And then we pick it up and we finish it with excellence every single time. Like, it will not fail. If we working together, you've got someone on your team who knows how to get the job done with excellence. And I've never had a book project that didn't come to fruition with premium quality, because we're a team. If you have Fernling Creative and Fernling Press with you, you have a book coach, you have a collaborative writer, then you have a developmental editor, you've got a line editor, you've got a proofreader, you've got a layout and design expert, a graphic designer to do a beautiful and premium cover and back cover, and you've got an interior layout expert who makes the inside of your book look phenomenal. If you want to, I have, a professional audio engineer who will help you turn it into an audiobook. And then I have a Spanish translator if you need it to be prepared for a Spanish speaking audience. So everything happens in order, and everything gets accomplished for a phenomenal book every time. So that is why people work with me, because they did experience that failure. Like, I had it in my heart to do it, but I found that I couldn't on my own. And then you link arms with a team who knows exactly how to get the job done in your voice, and it happens every time.
So we talked about toward the end of the marathon, or toward the end of the book project. Let's focus on the start, or even before someone starts. So what about the AI technology piece? So a lot of, like, everyone's talking about AI. I feel like it's the number one talk of the town right now, or the globe. So what if someone just says, I'll just utilize AI technology to write the book for me? What would your response be to that?
Right. So I'll take you to a funeral that I went to about 3 weeks ago. So I went to a funeral. It was the parent of a good friend. So I actually didn't know the person who had passed. I was really there to support a close friend. So I sat down, and the minister gave a talk for about 25 minutes. And about 30 seconds in, I leaned over and said to the person next to me, AI wrote this. I recognized it immediately. And then I just sat there and looked around as all the people around me fell asleep. Now, they were generally older, so maybe they would have anyway, but probably not. AI is a wonderful tool if you really, really know how to use it. If you are not an AI expert, which is actually happening already, people who use AI, if you use it in a general rule, like, help me write this book, you will get a product that nobody wants to read and that everybody goes to sleep to, because the training of AI speaks in generalities. An AI has been fed tons and tons of content. It's been fed transcripts and newspapers and magazines and movie scripts. It's all turned into soup, wonderful soup in AI that's extremely general. And so when you pump something out of AI, just as it is, you have a product that is the opposite of premium. You have generally been reduced to a generality because that's what AI does. It takes 1,000 sources and finds the most common patterns and then generates new content with that best practice, so to speak. So it has no heart at all because it can't, and it has no soul, it has no individuality or no sparkle. So that's why you'll get a very, very uninteresting and low quality product using AI. You will get a product, but in the manner you're describing, will give you a very low quality product that nobody wants to read because it has no heart and no soul.
So, for individuals that want to work with you to write a book, so they want to be an active participant, giving you elements of content, maybe they write a few articles and provide that to you. So, you're working back and forth. There's still an element of a dedication of time. What if during the start of the process, so the start of that marathon, they recognize that it's a little bit more time consuming than they originally signed up for? What do you do to help in that way?
Well, ghostwriting and book coaching and collaborating works on a continuum, Matt. So there are people that I work with that are really invested in the process. They really want to write this book, and I am in full support of that. So that person who is like on our continuum is pinned over on the right side of it. They want to write every chapter out and send it to me. So before we get to that, every client and I sit down and we lay out the book because we need that GPS that we talked about in previous podcasts. They need a hub, but we need a central idea that everything is tied to very tightly. Otherwise, people become uninterested. They get lost. They don't know where the book is going. So I work with the client to lay out a book that's engaging and interesting and powerful and will bring out all of the expertise and experience of that author. And then we follow that plan all the way through. So following the plan is the stage you're talking about, a person's involvement. So some people want to take my plan and I give them a very clear writing plan. So all they got to do is open up what I sent them, a page, and then they got to follow the instructions. And if they want to write the chapter themselves, they do that. And I don't care how crappy the writing is, just get it down and send me what you got. And then there's people on the other end who want it to be their work, but they really don't enjoy the writing process. They really don't want the labor of writing it out or typing it. So we use voice transcription software like Otter is my go-to. There's lots of them out there, but Otter I find works really well. I'll give them the same document and they just speak it out. And we have stories, everything built in. So all they got to do is hit record and then go through the sheet that I've provided and talk it out in sections. And the software will transcribe it and they just send me the transcription. So it's very fast and easy, and almost everyone is successful in that method. The example that I gave a few minutes ago, the person started out, got half the book done that way, and then began to wobble there, which is when I flew over there and we did it in one sitting. She said, let's kamikaze this thing. So we kamikazed it and it was done in one sitting. And then I'm off of her case and I take it and run with it from there. So we're working on a continuum and everyone can be successful somewhere on the continuum.
So you went through a lot of different objections, overcoming these objections. If we're at the end of the marathon, if we're in the beginning of the marathon, I want to wrap it back to the why based on what you just spelled out for us process wise. So as people are doing this, I'm sure they're learning different things about themselves. Obviously, especially if they're working with you, they're learning more about their story. They're definitely more in touch with different elements of specific moments in their past. They've done some processing. They've learned how to organize their thoughts based on what you're doing. So, to tie it back to the why, do you start to see other positive things in people as they're working on the book? So maybe they finally figure out what they should be focusing on branding wise, or maybe they focus on here are the messages that I should be sharing. Or if they're a leader of leaders where maybe they run a large organization, here are certain things that we should focus on, maybe from certain chapters that they're working on with you. So are there other areas of someone's life that are improved outside of them being engaged in the book writing process that you've picked up on over the years?
I'll take that question and just spin the dial a tiny bit to what my experience has been. A lot of times we're writing a book together, and what happens is, we start out writing on 7 topics, let's say. They say, I really feel like I want to address these 7 topics based on my life experience. And off we go. And then at the end of it, they'll say, and this has happened again and again, what happens is I generally keep the chapters more or less the same length, same ballpark. But all of a sudden, I look and say, 3 of these chapters are 9,000 words, and 4 of these chapters are 3,000 words. A, that's a problem that needs to be fixed. But B, it says something about that person's heart and their message and where they really feel passionate. So I'll say, hey, let's say the client is John. I say, hey, John, seems like you have a ton to say about public service and these 2 other topics. And they say, yeah, like I couldn't wait to write those chapters. And when I did, or voice recorded them or whatever, I just felt like I just wanted to go on all day. I had so much and so many stories came to mind, so many examples. So then we'll say, that's really interesting. What if we do a keynote speech that is really focused on one or those 3 topics? And that's what you do in the future. So a particular client, this is exactly what happened. It's happened to 2 this year, where we thought we were talking on 6 to 8 topics. 3 emerged as the heart and soul of the passion of that person, that author. And then at the end of the process, these authors said, this is the direction I'm going in. I really want to teach, public speak, keynote speak, TED Talk, and do professional workshops and professional development on these 3 things. So then we developed the branding for their consulting and public speaking around those 3 topics. And those are the ones that go on their websites, where someone goes on there looking for a keynote speaker or a workshop leader. It'll say on their website, I am willing to come and speak on these 3 things. And then we take all that content and we put it on there, and people can see what their message is on those topics. So yes, Matt, it's become directional in that people learn things about themselves. That was your question. But then it changes their trajectory into where they're heading after the book project.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And thank you for your time today. And thank you for your time with the entire series that we put together. I know a lot of people are getting a lot of value out of it for sure. There's 3 specific things that I'm going to remember from our conversation today. One of them is you mentioning that it starts with the heart. I think that's really important. People have a heart they want to write a book. There's an emotional tie, and then it needs to change to more logical as well. So there's a heart reason and a logic reason for writing a book. And then you took us through all the different logical pieces from increased influence, credibility. You wrote the book on something, speaking, thought leadership, marketing, all the different things that you broke down regarding why someone would want to write a book. Second piece is just understanding all the different objections that could come up during that marathon process, that book writing process, and how people can get over that. I appreciate you sharing that. But the third and final piece that I'm going to take away is I appreciate you mentioning that AI does not have a heart or soul. And I thought it was really interesting that while you were at that funeral during that eulogy, you actually could pick up that it was written by AI. And I think that's really important that as more and more people are utilizing AI and they're utilizing the heartless, soulless aspect of that communication, so to speak, people are starting to pick up on this for sure. So I appreciate those 3 points. Again, I really appreciate the conversation today and the entire series. If someone wants to reach out to you, Amy, where they want to get information on what you do, they want to reach out to you to help with a book, where's the best place that they can go to get that information?
Yeah, just hop on my website, fernlingcreative.com, all one word. And just there's a contact tab at the top. Just shoot me a message, reach out, and we'll get together and talk it over.
Perfect. I'll include all that in the show notes. People would just click and go from there. But Amy, thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.